Harlem Chamber Players. Welcome to our celebration of all that Goddard Riverside does, and to thank the man who has dedicated 40 years to this organization, Stephan Russo.
When we built this building in the early 80s, we didn't only want to build housing for seniors, but we also wanted to build a center where seniors from the neighborhood could come and be with each other. And growing old in the city is not necessarily the easiest thing to do, but this is a place where we really do what we say, which is really build community. Sí, usted está bien metido en la comunidad, ¿no? Yeah. Usted lleva mucho tiempo Viniendo a este centro, no? You also tell me what to do too. A lot of familiar faces. In my years here, I've had a relationship with a lot of these seniors. I've seen them come every day, grow, and it's not what we do for the seniors, it's about what they are doing for themselves, and we just help them do that. But I think if you walk around the center, you'll get the feeling that there's a real sense of pride, a sense of neighborhood, and a sense of belonging that I think is really, really important for seniors.
To me, the essence of Stephan in action is to watch him walk the halls and the streets around Goddard and greet so many people by name, and people who are so happy to see him and so welcoming.
So? Greenkeepers are doing good.
Greenkeepers are doing great.
My niece doing better. How's the building? How are we doing in the building?
Everything's okay.
Yeah?
When our clients see Stephan, their faces light up. I mean, they love him.
How many years do I know you?
Oh, about 30, 40 years. And he was one of the best camp counselors we ever had.
So where you headed?
I'm going back to the church right now.
He's sort of, I think, the Renaissance man of nonprofit. He really is pretty amazing. The idea of having touched so many people's lives, I hope he knows it to the extent that he can get pleasure from it, because boy, he really should.
This is where it begins. It begins with young children and working with families. You know, we have 4 child care centers for about 200 families that we work with. You can't do it for a year or 2 and then walk away. So when you're in a community for as long as I have been, and you see people grow and you see generations come through, that's really... So, in our society, we want sort of quick fixes to some of these issues, and they're not quick fixes. So you got to be in for the long haul.
Stephan Russo is a really amazing individual. He's extremely intelligent. He feels deeply for people. He's got a great sense of humor.
He's a guy whose just fundamental goodness is sort of undeniable. He's got compassion to spare, and he's a moral person, and he's an optimist as well, which I think is an essential component of any sort of work like this.
It's never about one person, but I think at the end of the day, I can step back and say, this didn't happen by accident. And I worked really, really hard at it too. So
when he sees something that should be different about our community, it touches him deeply. He becomes very passionate about it, and allows him. He goes right up to the barricades and tries to change things. That's what makes him special.
He is steady, and he is a visionary. And he has done so much for this organization. I think he's leaving it in very good health.
Good evening. Good evening. I'm Nicholas Martin Smith. I'll be your MC tonight. You may ask yourself, who am I? Where did I come from? What do I think I'm doing? Well, I do have my credentials. My theater company, Hudson Warehouse, had the privilege of being honored as the recipient of a Good Neighbor Award in 2013. And we're all very proud of this. In the fall of 2013, we became the resident theater company of the Bernie Wall Center and presented more than 60 performances, as well as teaching. Thank you. Thank you very much. Also, our teaching in the after-school program, as well as the senior center. But I think my most important qualification for being here tonight is I am a great admirer of Stephan Russo. And also, the co-producers of tonight's event could figure they could trust me not to go off script. I'll try. Okay, so to understand Stephan and Goddard Riverside, we have to go back more than 100 years to the late 1800s and the beginning of the settlement house movement, which Goddard Riverside is part of. The those were amazing settlements, okay? And they were established in response to a lot of the...
Established in response to the huge influx of immigrants, overcrowded neighborhoods, and inadequate housing. We women were trying to get the vote, and the social and economic problem seemed insurmountable. Not that you would know anything about it.
Ladies and gentlemen, Jane Addams. One of the first founders of a settlement house in the United States and a Nobel Peace Prize winner.
They know who I am. I worked hard to create Hull House in Chicago with a desire to assist the less fortunate in the community, to reach out to neighbors as partners, and to closely listen and observe and then react to social needs.
Thank you. The famous Jane Addams, ladies and gentlemen. Even though a lot has changed since her time, the philosophy of the original settlements has remained the same today. We are one of 38 settlements still in the city today. Yeah. Now, throughout the first half of the 20th century, the settlement houses focused, continued on immigrants, on the working poor, also on rising unemployment that was caused by the Great Depression, and later on with the family and health needs in the wake of World War II. The 50s changed the course of this organization forever. Starting in 1951, with the singularly most important event for Goddard Riverside in the 20th century. And I think you all know exactly what I'm talking about. The birth of Stephan Russo. Yeah. And with the merger 8 years later of the Goddard Neighborhood Center and then the Riverside Community House in the West 60s, Goddard Riverside Community Center was born. Yeah. Some of this is down. But little did, this pretty much went unnoticed by Stephan at the time because he was only 8 years old. But little did he know that one day he would be instrumental in the merger of two more mergers for Goddard Riverside. All right? No, St. Matthew's and St. Timothy's Neighborhood Center and Lincoln Square Neighborhood Center. Now, in honor of Stephan, here is the Goddard Riverside Young People's Chorus. It's all yours.
And good evening. As the children are walking on, I'd like to introduce them to you. My name is Francisco Nunez. I'm the artistic director and founder of the Young People's Chorus of New York City. 5 years ago, we went to Susan and to Stephan, and we asked them would they give us a home so that we can bring together the children in the Prelude Division of the YPC. And they opened up their house very generously across the street. And then eventually they said, is there a way that we can bring the Goddard Riverside children together with the YPC? And at that point, the Goddard Riverside Children's Chorus was formed. It was through his vision and his generosity that we were able to create this chorus. And what he was able to see during these changing times in New York City, where children are coming from from this neighborhood, coming from different buildings, there's an opportunity for them to come together and learn from each other. And that's what this chorus is about. And to me, it's a very important opportunity because I was one of those kids that could have been on the picture because I grew up in this neighborhood back in the early 60s and 70s, and Stephan was a social worker assigned to my block on 87th Street back then. And so Stephan, it's a real pleasure to see you and to give us the opportunity to be able to bring children together continuously all these years, and you singing is a means of bringing them together. So we honor you this evening and say thank you for believing in our young people and our future. Here is the Young People's Chorus of the Goddard Riverside Community Chorus Center. Thank you.
That last song was a tribute to Stephan and his tremendous optimism and willingness to keep up the struggle for justice and equality for all, while still dealing with all the difficulty, all the challenges. Back to the history. After the established in 1959, Goddard Riverside found a home over on West 87th Street and used local venues for their existing youth programs. Throughout the 60s, while Stephan was still in high school, the organization dedicated itself to urban renewal projects here on the Upper West Side. But by the end of the decade, it was still empty lots and condemned tenement houses.
You must persevere to overcome these challenges.
Yeah, well, it was tough to live in New York City in the 70s. I mean, poverty jumped from 14.5% to 20.2%. And the youth gangs ruled many of the neighborhoods.
And don't forget women's rights, civil rights.
True. True. Well, on the bright side, Bernie Wall was hired as the new executive director. In 1972, and he brought with him his strong vision from his settlement work in Ohio.
I don't understand these terms. In my day, they were called head workers. Bernie Wall was the head worker. I don't understand these fancy terms like executive whatever.
Thank you, Jane. Head worker. I like that. Bernie Wall's hiring went unnoticed by Stephan, who at this point was studying at Brown University, on his way to becoming an All-American lacrosse player.
Not on our block. Not on our block.
Wonderful. Goddard Riverside stirred up the neighborhood.
Yeah, well, one of these groups, called Continue, tried to prevent the building of Phelps House, and for several years, they did.
Darn right. Goddard Riverside just tried to cram too many low-income housing units into this neighborhood.
Settlements can't just accept social problems. We create change, bring people together, work on solutions, even if it's not acceptable to some.
In the end, it was resolved, and Phelps House stands today. Now, back to head worker Bernie Wall. He took risks. He engaged in community outreach and neighborhood involvement. He believed in community organizing and pushed back against the groups who were resistant to the low-income housing. Equally concerned with gangs and street gangs, he started a new youth program, and he hired Fred Johnson to head up that initiative. Fred Johnson, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, sir.
Since I retired from Goddard Riverside, I occasionally meet with Steph for coffee or lunch or at the book fair. And he always takes pains to introduce me to people that have come on since I left. And so I meet the new staff and meet board members and meet whoever he's talking to at the time. But he always ends up his introduction by pointing to me and saying, "This is the guy who hired me." So it was in the summer of 1976, Goddard Riverside got a grant to run a delinquency prevention program. And the program had 6 outreach workers, and Steph was was applying for one of those positions. And I remember the first interview we had, and it was at the old main office of Goddard Riverside that you saw on the screen before, on 87th Street, the 2nd floor. It was a very hot day, and there was no air conditioning, and Stephan was, beads of perspiration were running down his face. And he said, in the interview, he was sitting on the edge of a seat, leaning forward, very intense and probably very anxious. And as we talked, as he talked, he talked profusely, and he sweated profusely. But I learned that he had spent 2 years in the Peace Corps in Colombia, South America, where he had experiences working with people. And he was fluent in Spanish. and then you heard about the lacrosse. He went to Brown University before he went to the Peace Corps, but he became a big star in the lacrosse team. And then after he left Brown, he was inducted into the Brown University Sports Museum. And you can go up there now today and go to the museum, and you'll see all of that. So the youth program ended. We found out that it was a opening for a director of the Goddard Riverside Community Center, the one that is now the Bernie Wall Center. And I said to Bernie, take a look at this guy. I think he's a good candidate. And that was Stephan Russo. And he was a good candidate. And Bernie nurtured him and groomed him and moved him along up through the agency to the various levels until he became the associate executive director. And he was Bernie's hand-picked choice to take his place as executive director once Bernie retired. But there was a little sideline thing that I wanted to mention, that the board said that we have to have a search so that we're very transparent, that there's no politics involved in it, and everybody who's qualified would have a chance to apply. And one of the applicants was Ruth Messenger. And we all knew her and liked her. She was the borough president of Manhattan. And in 1997, she ran for mayor and lost to Rudy Giuliani. But ultimately, the board decided that Steph had many years of performing at a very high level, and he had the Goddard Riverside DNA, and so he became the executive director. And I think that Bernie would approve of this final chapter in Stephan Russo's career at Goddard Riverside Community Center. Thanks.
It was during this time that, of neighborhood unrest that Stephan was introduced to the settlement house. And it wasn't long before he enrolled in Columbia University and completed his master's in social work. What? A unicycle. Well, Fred Johnson is also an acrobat. And he implemented a unicycle program to help the kids. Now, something with this kind of innovation and quality programming was inspirational to Stephan. He made the connection that self-esteem and dedicated activity worked hand in hand with the youth development.
We never
Working with young people remained a major priority for Stephan for the rest of his career at Goddard Riverside. He saw the value of innovations, like bringing in the Young People's Chorus. He raised the money to renovate the Bernie Walls Center. He fostered the development of daycare and Head Start, and he understood the importance of the Options College Access Program, replicating it on 4 different sites. And creating the Options Training Institute, which was recognized for its excellence in training guidance counselors across the city. Now, one of these replication sites was in Cypress Hills, and Michelle Neugebauer, executive director there, worked closely with Stephan on this project.
So glad to be here tonight, and I'm not getting on a unicycle. Stephan's generosity is truly remarkable. Our organization, the Cypress Hills Local Development Corporation, was so blessed and so lucky 17 years ago to be selected by Stephan for the replication project. And I've been executive director of Cypress Hills Local Development Corporation for 32 years, and I have never seen, and we come from a very fierce, very awesome, incredible industry, but I have never seen another executive director of any community development organization, any settlement house, do what Stephan did in the replication project. So not only did he use his expertise, his time, his entire organization, but he used his philanthropic contacts and his donors to replicate what was already a nationally recognized model, the Options Program, in 4 high-needs neighborhoods. So fast forward 17 years later, thousands of young people in Cypress Hills and East New York have gotten the opportunity to go to college because of Stephan Russo. And if you multiply that by the 4 other replication sites, that's tens and thousands of young people who have had the opportunity, that ticket out of poverty, that college degree because of Stephan Russo, because he believed so deeply in the model that he was able to go to his base of supporters to hold harmless the options funding while replicating it throughout the city in really high-need, high-poverty communities. So what kind of man does this, right? What kind of man goes outside of the realm of not-for-profit management to replicate a model program in other communities? I'll tell you what kind of man does that. It's a man with a really big heart, with incredible spirit, a man who believes that access to higher education is not just about economic prosperity, it's about social justice. And that's why I love Stephan Russo, and that's why I'm so proud to celebrate his achievements with all of you here tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. As a salute to Stephan and all that he's accomplished, partners of the Community Arts Program have gotten together and to show their gratitude.
Arts are essential.
Yeah.
They bind the community together in celebration of the human spirit.
Absolutely.
The great unifier across cultures, ages, and economics.
Yes, and Stephan has always embraced that idea. Dan Cooper of Composers Concordance wrote an original piece for Stephan entitled Songo for Stephan. Now, the term Songo refers to a specific rhythm of Cuban music. Now, tonight's world premiere will be performed by the Harlem Chamber Players with percussions by Max Pollack and Afro Roots curator Kevin Nathaniel Hawthorne. Enjoy.